Okay, for people joining this live stream, we are talking about enhancements to our Paclet system for distributing Wolfram Language capabilities, going beyond the function repository, which is for individual functions. And by the way, that's I don't know if people have been paying attention in the meeting. I'm really quite pleased with the functions which are coming into the function repository. I think they're looking quite good. Brad, I mean, there should be more of them, but I like what I'm seeing so far.
Yeah.
Okay.
Up that process as well.
What's that?
We're stepping up that process next week as well.
And do you have a internal management process in place where we can actually get those things reviewed quickly? Or has that not?
Yeah, we're kicking that up into gear next week.
Okay. Oh, I see. So you've got today's daily. You've got the daily manifest of what came in.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, so that was like 4 today, and whatever that is. Pretty nice. Pretty nice. So, okay, so that I can copy paste and it will just work, right?
It is better.
Very cool. Okay, all right. So that's just by way of introduction. I want to say that I'm quite pleased with the fact that it is getting comparatively easy to install a single function in the function repository. So the Paclet repository is for bigger things. Okay, what's happening here? So what's the state of the design? And we're
you're talking about the code design.
Yeah, I mean, have we finished specifying what the user level functions should be?
I think so.
I'm not sure if we're finished, but we have, I mean, we're, on that path.
Okay,
I think there's two levels to it as well. There's the Paclet level, which is all of Todd's stuff, this stuff, and then there's just going to be a repository level for finding and grabbing stuff from a repository
and documenting.
Yeah, right. And that second level we haven't done any design for at all.
So you can we've
done some hand wavy talking. Oh, maybe John has something I haven't seen.
I put together a very first draft of a Packless guide page, which you're welcome to look at.
Where is it?
It's where guide pages are. It's called Packlets.
Oh, okay, fine.
No function home pages, so we're just looking at a guide page here. But I thought that would be the most useful.
No, it's useful
thing to look at in this meeting. So this is a combination of stuff that is, already exists in the Paclet Manager context, and one presumes should migrate to the system context, and some comments which you made in a meeting with Todd a while ago that he made some notes from, and I was working from Todd's notes.
Right. This is the names that you suggested, and reflects the changes that you wanted. I've already done one of these things, except it's actually not recorded here. You wanted Paclet site change to Paclet site object, so
okay.
First.
Oh, actually, from the notes, the way you took them, I wasn't sure if you were in support of that change. So,
to me, it seemed kind of arbitrary, but I made it because it was relatively easy, and I can see some justification for it. So I jumped in. I picked that as the lowest hanging fruit.
Okay, so Paclet object represents a Paclet. So what's the difference between that and a resource object?
Paclet objects should stand alone something you could make and mail a zip file to your friend. Resource object is specifically for distribution.
Okay, so why is there a Paclet object symbolic representation?
Well. Okay. So a Paclet object is a Paclet which you have installed into the system in some way. It may be backed by a directory on your file system or a .paclet file, or maybe Todd has other thoughts too.
That's basically the two things that can break. I mean, this Paclet object is simply a handle for something that exists elsewhere. The actual content of this Paclet resides somewhere. This is essentially a metadata representation of what's in the Paclet, including its location.
So that's similar to a content object or a resource object.
Yes.
I mean, it basically represents a Paclet with a specified location. Is that right? With a specified name, or how do you reference a Paclet?
I mean, Paclets are returned by functions like Paclet find, for example. You don't type a Paclet expression in to a session. You get it back from some query like a Paclet find.
So, I mean, this is like, notebook object, for example. A notebook object potentially is a thing that, is backed by a thing that's in a file. But, notebook object is a loaded, version of that.
Okay, so what is this? This is that represents. What do you use this for, Paclet object? Use it to uninstall it? Use it? What do you do it? What do you use it for?
You can use it for things like getting information, querying what things are in this Paclet, or finding resources within this Paclet.
So can I ask then? I'm making this all up, and I'm just using this as a page to invent things here, but would information be expected to work on a Paclet object?
Well, so right now we have a thing called Paclet information, but you had suggested, not unreasonably, I think, that Paclet objects should instead be something that can take, string fields that can be queried, association style.
Fine. That's okay, but then we can just have information that produces a blob, which is the style that we're using for lots of other things.
Okay,
right. And in fact, it already does support that, John. You can already use it with, string accessors for the Paclet. Just use the Paclet expression as the head. But yes, information should work on this. Paclet information function was written long before information did all the things that information does now.
Yeah, okay. And I haven't been totally on the train of what's going on with information. It's maybe I should be looking at information with regard to GitLink, because there's some similar issues there.
Yes, I'm sure you should. I mean, information is a general thing that, right? If you say, I don't know whether this will work, but let's say classify. Can I do that? Why didn't that do anything? Help! What's happening here? Oh, wow. Okay. Oh, well, it has to be rules. Whatever. This is kind of boring. I mean, let's just whatever. I'm trying to just generate some simple thing here. God. Okay. So if I say information of that. See, that's what it will do.
Okay, I have not seen this sort of thing before.
Okay, and it has lots of ways to query. The basic point is that it's used particularly in a case where that predictor function in out5, you can actually feed that, 5.6, and it'll give a number, right? So it has already used up its sub value.
I'm curious. Do those labels are they like string keys that could be used?
Yes, but I don't know why they don't have mouse over here. That's a hover effect. Somebody should make a note that should work. Those should hover. What's that?
No, I said yes, Stephen. I'll report that.
Okay. But that's the idea of this. And I think this is a good way to present, for a Paclet, that would be a nice way. If you get back a Paclet object, you can say it. I mean, the Paclet object should presumably format a bit like this, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So But now Paclet find is not in your list here. Oh, yes, it is in your list there.
Yeah.
So, okay, so walk me through, how is a Paclet named? How do I get to a Paclet? By the way, we have a question on the... Yeah.
Did you want to go to the question?
Yeah, let's just go to a couple of the questions here. George is asking, is this functionality going to be in version 12? I am happy to say that it is not, because version 12 is wrapped up and in final testing. So anything we're discussing now isn't going there. B3 asks, any chance when the migration happens, the Paclet manager function names can just be aliases for the system level functions?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. They will certainly be supported. All the Paclet manager context symbols will all just continue to work.
Right. Okay, that was the question. Yes, that's fine. Carl is asking, will there be a way to do version management for Paclets?
I'm not exactly sure what he means by that.
Well, I mean, I would imagine one thing one might want to do is to back it with a Git, repository.
Well, so the, I mean, what we're looking at here is, except for what's inside Paclet development, is mostly, you have a Paclet already. You have a fixed thing, and you should be able to query it for information and that sort of thing. But
you're saying fundamentally you probably didn't write it. You were just given that.
Or maybe you did write it, but it's in kind of built form.
Yes. But so what's the answer? I mean, to me, having something where you can back the Paclet repository with Git seems really useful. What's the status of backing a repository?
Well, I don't think that's exactly the question, really. But the if you're doing well, first of all, one of the more useful things is to be able to work with the Paclet, kind of in situ in your development environment, and what is called in this guide page Paclet activate and Paclet deactivate facilitate that. And I think verify Paclet also helps to verify that what you have in development is a thing which can actually build a Paclet.
Okay, let's break this into two pieces. Okay. Mm-hmm. So Carl is clarifying that what he wanted was, first of all, auto-updating of Paclets, which is what we tend to do for our own Paclets. That is, if there is a newer version, it will automatically download and set itself up on your system. Correct? I mean, that's what we're planning for this, right?
There's a new facility for that. It's hooked up only, however, for Paclets that load the Wolfram Language code, right? By need, something like that. So there's a trivial way to now identify if Paclet is auto-updating. That updating is noticed and triggered at the time you first load its .m files. So if you got a packet that just had front-end palettes or something like that, at the moment there's no facility to have that type of packet auto-update.
Okay, but
that has Wolfram Language code, which is the most common kind, I think, by far, that is trivially simple to mark it as auto-update.
Okay, but I mean
and then of course you can manually update using Paclet update, Paclet check update to see if there is something.
I understand, but I'm okay. So there's two different questions here. So first of all, let's break it into three issues. Mm-hmm. Okay. Issue one: does it auto update if there is an update available? What you're saying is you have a facility for that. There's a hook you don't yet have for updating non-code Paclets, basically. Right, but fundamentally,
maybe I didn't. Yeah, there's a hook right now. It actually exists right now to identify Paclet. Just put a rule in your Paclet info. Loading or updating goes to true or automatic, that is, and it will automatically update before the code is first loaded.
Right, but you were making some caveat. You're making some footnote about menus, but let's not.
But it doesn't work for that.
Okay, but that's just some bug limitation type thing, I would imagine. Let's not worry about.
You got bug. Yes, fine, but it's. I don't know a good spot to. I don't see a good place to detect it.
That's a different issue. That's an issue for John. I mean, I understand that. That's the question: is when do you ever notice that hasn't been done, right? But because you're not. It's when you're asking for a function and the function is whoops, that function is a Paclet function, then you can do the check. If you're asking for a menu, you don't know that menu was Paclet delivered, although you could know that. You could tag that menu as having been Paclet delivered, and whenever you touch that menu, it could go and try and do its check.
Right, it would need something like that.
Right. So in other words, the point is that the function has a stub that says it's a Paclet delivered function, but the menu does not have such a stub. That true?
Well, so it's not exactly that there's a stub. It's just that the Paclet manager can detect when get is called, and it can then look up this context and say, oh, the Paclet delivered this context. I will see if it's an auto updating Paclet. There's a notion of loading a Paclet. If it has Wolfram Language file, if a Paclet just has style sheets or something in it, say, there's not an obvious place to hook the loading of this Paclet.
Well, until you reference that style, until you reference
and I'll probably need some help I'll probably need some assistance from the front end to be able to actually detect all that.
Fine. But those are minority cases relative to the main ones.
Yes.
Code. Okay, so there are two further issues. One issue is, what if you don't want the Paclet to update? That was an issue Carl was raising here on our stream, that if you want only version 2, even though version 6 is the most current one, but your code works in version 2, and you as the writer of the code want to prevent the Paclet from updating itself. Are we going to support that, or are we not going to support that?
Well, I think there are a couple of different ways one could approach this issue. One is, you could say, well, do you as the user of the system have the ability to override and probably the most convenient way to do that would be through some user interface.
And, exactly. So you'd be able to select something that says, ask me when Paclets are going to update.
And I don't think that's an unreasonable request, but it's just not something I'm prepared to discuss right now.
Right. Okay. So for the future, one can imagine a UI element or something in, it would be probably in the evaluation menu or someplace like that, that says Paclet updating ... And you will be able to set that to say always update every Paclet, never update any Paclet, or choose which Paclets to update.
I mean, in general, I think this would be part of a larger Paclet interface, but yes.
Right. I could imagine something like, an option to needs or some other way of loading the Paclet where you can give a version. And
so
you could have coexisting versions.
This is related to the second thing that I was going to raise is if you are developing your own Paclet, one might suggest that, and it has a dependency on another Paclet. You might want to lock the version numbering in. And that's a stickier question because we don't really have a good way of, side-by-side loading into the same instance of the kernel, multiple versions.
Right. That's pretty horrifying.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously one could, it's pretty horrifying. I mean, one could do it with context and things, but it's pretty horrifying.
For the Paclet repository, I think we want to, impose a, this isn't a thing that's a constraint of Paclets themselves, but for things in the Paclet repository, I think we want to impose a well-defined, namespacing behavior that you don't get to change things outside of a certain declared namespace, and maybe we can work up a side-by-side sort of thing with that, but it seems like it might be fragile.
Let me go to a different issue, okay? So let's say you're a professional software developer, you've got all your stuff in Git, and you want to expose stuff from Git. And let's talk about all of our repositories here. You want to expose stuff from Git through one of our repositories. How does that work?
Well, the first and foremost way is that you make a deliberate decision to publish. So it's basically you as the human serving as a release manager, as a release conduit from your Git repository to our Paclet repository.
And how easy is that to do?
Well, I mean, this is basically how all repositories, package repositories work these days. It's how npm works. It's how
so my
works.
Question would be, in the thing we have, for example, let's take new let's see, repository item. Let's say a new function repository page, right? Are you suggesting that I would have a version of this page in Git?
Yes. I think we might dispute a bit about whether it is in notebook form, but yes, absolutely.
Okay, let's talk about that point.
And you, as the maintainer of the package, will have certain responsibilities when you submit your initial version and when you submit new versions. I mean, you'll have a responsibility to update the version number when you submit your new version, for example.
Okay, you've raised an interesting point there, which we had not really considered, which is if you're using an IDE like Atom or IntelliJ or something like this, right, that is not a notebook-based IDE, right? Perhaps we should have a version of these definition notebooks that are not notebooks, that are suitable for those textual IDEs.
I don't have a strong opinion for other repositories, but for Paclets, we already have that. That's the Paclet info.m file, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't have a simplified interface, but I think it available, but I think there absolutely should be the option to just deal with the Paclet info.m file.
Okay, but so for example, in this case, one of the reasons that this is usefully a notebook is the examples are very notebook based. I mean, the main issue, right, is diffing of notebooks in Git, correct?
It's not just diffing, it's also being able to being able to easily see what's going on from a variety of environments where you may not have a convenient notebook environment set up to look at things. People explore code all the time, and we shouldn't discourage that.
Right, I understand. But so what I'm suggesting then is that perhaps we should make sure to provide, particularly for the function repository, for people who want to keep their stuff on GitHub or whatever, some way of people, or maybe we have something like this, but some way for people, some standardized GitHub repository structure that immediately, maps into what you need for function repository submission.
Right. So one could imagine, moving beyond the workflow that I described, where you are the release conduit, you're doing a manual step to submit. One could imagine having some kind of thing where either your local system or the Paclet repository system might ingest a thing from a branch that lives on a GitHub server or some other popular Git repository sites. I've seen this, Sublime Text, for example, has the ability to pull down add-ons, pull down and compile automatically add-ons from a GitHub repository.
Right. So the way we would do that, just to, like the resource system, is now using assets that are in a CDN, right? So this is just another resource location setting that a resource object could have. Is that right, Bob or Brad? Would that make sense? So in other words,
I think mostly right. I think that for purely metadata things like version number and name, we would have a duplicate copy in the resource system. But
and by the way, it also depends on what form you want to ingest it. GitHub has a way of releasing things, and when you build a release, you can do something like put a .paclet file there. I've actually done this for GitLink, but once again, that's kind of a human step. A human has to say, I'm going to release. I declare the release number this version number, and the release this version number, and I upload this build. Whereas there's this other possibility where you can say, well, what I really want to do is I just want to get whatever the master branch in the Git repo is. And then, but that's going to involve a build step though. Someone somewhere has to build something, which means, we have to have conventions that say, if you want to be able to submit yourself through an automated build system, then, your development environment has to look like this.
Right. I imagine, for as far as this definition notebook goes, I imagine that this will have fields that basically define a Paclet info.m, which is the metadata. And then the actual content, whether it's style sheets or code or palettes, must already exist. And if it's already in the structure of a Paclet, you can just point to it, whether it's on GitHub or local or in a cloud directory. And if it's not already in the structure of a Paclet, we can try to make some sort of tool that builds this structure correctly for you.
So on our very active live stream, lots of good comments, which I'm going to go to in a minute, but we're being pointed to this actual example of user-created GitHub repository.
Yeah, and this is what I was talking about. I do exactly this with GitLink.
I do the same thing for prototype Paclet.
Wait a minute, exactly the same? I mean, is there some standardized format here that is being used, or is this?
Well, it's what's been done here is a .paclet file was built by a developer and then uploaded as part of GitHub's releasing mechanism. So the building of that .paclet file, that was done by a human.
Yeah, I get it.
So I have a build script that builds the Paclets with the Paclet commands, and I think other people do the same thing. And then you just upload it. There's a form for it,
and sometimes it can be simple, but sometimes it's less simple. Like, for example, when I build GitLink, GitLink has library link components, and if I want to upload a .paclet file that's going to be useful for lots of users, I need to have a library link component for Linux, for Windows, for Macintosh, and I don't do all that on my systems. I actually run it through our automated build systems, but that would be, of course, more problematic for our users.
Well, I mean, that requires that we have build services on all the platforms and so on.
And by the way, that is exactly why I've not been in favor of supporting Library Link right out of the gate. Not because I don't want to support Library Link, but because let's get something working well on a large class of things that's an easier problem before we tackle the more complex.
Okay, so let's not hold up 90% of the people for the last.
Let's just summarize what we're saying here. So what you're saying is we should be defining, and it's sort of self-defined, a standardized way of presenting Paclets on GitHub, for example. And then in terms of getting these Paclets into the Paclet repository, we should provide an easy way to do that. And you say parts of this already exist. Is that right?
Yeah. But, there are, for example, there are some conventions that people have used, but these conventions are nowhere codified.
Okay, well, so let's do it. I mean, let's define what the standard, and let's make sure we have tools that operate with that standard.
Yeah.
And some validation mechanism. Okay, I want to look at some of the very long, before they scroll way off the screen, lots of comments here, and let's just go through them, and then I want to go back.
So many comments, I've not been paying attention because I'm trying to pay attention to you.
Okay, all right, let's take a look here. Carl saying he's all for backing these things up with Git. Okay, point about, what if I have some random Java dependency that my Paclet requires? Will that be supported by the Paclet repository? What is that? So in other words, Paclet
can have a Java directory with Java files needed by JLink, and there's a simple way to specify that in Paclet, and I don't see any reason why even in
what if it requires
1.0.
Okay, no, but wait a second. What if it requires something which is taken from, I don't know, NPM or one of these other package repositories? In other words, do we have a method in the Paclet file that says actually go actively get? I mean, that's essentially what we're talking about with GitHub as well. Is, you know, in this Paclet. I mean, to me, that seems like the right way to do it.
Well, I don't think you would do that. I mean, the NPM example, maybe, you know, you're confusing this by using NPM as an example, but that's a build time dependency. That's not a runtime dependency.
Yeah,
okay.
you're gonna get these things at build time, and they're going to be just statically in your directory.
Fine. I want runtime dependency, but I'm okay. No, wait a second. So my point is, okay, let me try and unconfuse. So the issue is, let's say your Paclet refers to some external library and or code that's on GitHub, okay? So one thing you could have happen, probably not a good idea, is that as the Paclet is installed on your local system, it goes and checks those external, in addition to checking our Paclet repository, it goes and checks whether its dependencies on external package repositories need to be updated. Now, the alternative is you have a build process where you burn it in. You say this version of our Paclet and our Paclet repository has just these specific burnt-in versions of the external dependencies. Sorry, go ahead.
I would claim that the dependencies of Paclets should be other Paclets.
Agreed. Only other Paclets. We can resolve Paclet dependencies. We're not going to try to resolve at runtime, you know, downloading dependent Java libraries or something like that. I mean, who does that at runtime? That's a build time thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you want, you know, an updated set of you know, jar files, for example, I think there's basically two ways you do that. Either you bundle it with your Paclet, or you put a dependency on another Paclet which has those jar files. I
see. But it doesn't auto-update from the background Java repository. Okay.
Right. No.
Okay. All right. Brian is saying you need to support side-by-side Paclets, e.g. multiple copies of the same Paclet. Yes, that's fine.
We do have side-by-side installation.
That's no problem. You can't simultaneously run version 2 and version 3 in a single session. That's the only thing that is really hard. A notebook should specify which version of a Paclet it uses. That's interesting.
Well, I'm not sure this is a feature of notebooks. I mean, it's a feature of programs, but how much of it is a feature of notebooks?
Well, in what sense is it a feature of programs? How would you do that in a program? You would say essentially needs Paclet version such and such.
Yeah.
Right, but again, what do we do if the other later version of this Paclet has already been loaded, and we just don't have the ability in one session to have side-by-side loading of a Paclet? You know, you could have something that says require Paclet blah. I mean, in fact, there is the ability to download and install a specific version of the Paclet, but you can't be sure that
once you've loaded version 5,
it's going to get loaded, or that one hasn't already been loaded in advance.
Right. The problem is version 5 has already been loaded. At runtime, a piece of code demands version 3. I don't see how you can deal with that. I mean, unless you decide essentially to run a separate kernel.
If the contexts are completely isolated, and if there are no other side effects roaming around the system, it seems like it should be manageable. And we can't say that those things are constraints of Paclets in general, but they might be constraints imposed on Paclets accepted into the public Paclet repository.
What might be constraints?
Well, like for example, that your Paclet is namespace isolated.
I see. All right. So anyway, look, this is So that's an issue, is what we do with these side-by-side things. By the way, I'm not taking notes here, so I'm assuming somebody else is doing it.
But one thing which worries me, for example, is that it's difficult to impose that sort of isolation on Library Link. Library Link starts to pull in some, some operating system, dynamic library path issues, which can be.
Yeah, that's really complicated. Right.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with Java, with JLink and Java libraries, or .NET Link and assemblies. It's going to be the same issue.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we might be able to succeed in doing this if it's a pure Wolfram language code sort of thing, but beyond that, we're going to have some problems.
Okay. Let's see. B3 is saying subtle and probably too expensive to have the thing query it, but for new things at runtime, we just discussed that. Packlets should have a vendoring mechanism, e.g. Python's conda with requirements.txt. What is that about? Anybody know what that's about?
I'm not overly familiar with the details of conda, but in general, what we've talked about is having explicit dependency declaration, which I'm pretty sure is at least a piece of what he's talking about.
Okay. Question here is about integration with modern tools like Travis or AWS Code Build.
I totally agree that we should support like Travis CI would be a great thing.
What is it? What is it?
Well, so there are various systems that will on GitHub. They just for free, every time you do a commit, it will do a build and make sure that the build works. And if there are build errors, then it'll say that.
Right. Okay. So it's the kind of stuff we've had for 30 years, basically, internally, but this is a more streamlined version.
Well, and it's it's nice because it's a free service being offered by companies who sell premium versions of that service, but they offer the free version to anybody doing stuff in a public GitHub repo.
I see. So it'll go through and and try and build it. But what would it mean for us that it tries to build it? That it creates a Paclet, a candidate Paclet to download?
Well, I mean, it runs the entire set of build. I'll say scripts. They might it might be something that looks slightly different than a script, but it runs the entire thing and ensures success. And so success may include, depending on how much detail you go into for your project, it may include running a bunch of tests and ensuring that those tests all pass, for example. This is pretty common that in kind of the more industrial projects on GitHub, that they have extensive unit testing, and anytime someone submits a pull request, that pull request automatically gets built, and if the pull request didn't pass all the tests, then the reviewers are like, we're not going to waste time on this until you pass tests.
Hey, I've got a question. In the function repository, what are we doing about tests? Did we take out the tests from the default notebook you have to submit?
No, it's in there.
Where is it?
All the way at the bottom, under source and additional information.
Are people filling these out?
Mostly not.
What are we doing about that? I mean, we can clearly test against the examples, but what are we doing?
Right. That's it. We're pulling the examples.
Okay. The .NET strong assembly name feature works very well. Version number, name, vendor, and signature. What is that about? That's about referring to referencing a particular symbol and version.
Well, and this is the drum that I've been banging, which is that I feel that the namespace needs to include, not just the name of the Paclet, but also the name of whoever published the Paclets.
Right. Carl says we should be in touch with the GitHub folks to get notebooks displayed nicely. Yep, in process. That we got slowed down because GitHub was being ingested by Microsoft, so that distracted people. And then Ethan is suggesting making a way to import-export to Jupyter JSON format. I don't know how realistic that is. Anybody know?
Well, import would be wouldn't be too difficult because their format is pretty simple compared to ours.
Yeah. I mean, I assume they copied basic features of our format, and that's what it is. But
yeah, export would, although, you know, usually between import and export, usually export is the easy thing and import is the hard thing. You know, having done a bunch of these, that is not going to be true for Jupyter. Jupyter would be because their front end is just so underpowered compared to ours. Kind of simple notebooks could be done in straightforward fashion, but anything that's, you know, kind of in any way off the beaten path would, you know,
it might be interesting to have the import format. I don't know, particularly now that we have Python cells and things, one could actually run them. That's a worthwhile suggestion. Can we feed that to Shardy's people? Think they're relevant for people? Yep. Okay. How? I'm guessing this is currently many of us use GitHub releases to publish Paclets, and you specify the exact URL to install it in Mathematica directly from GitHub.
Yeah, I mean, in principle, that's a very easy thing to do because, you know, and it's basically just a download over HTTP. You know, you're just downloading the .paclet file, so that's like a really trivial sort of implementation.
But that's just saying Paclet install of a URL. Is that right?
Yes, and that works fine right now.
Okay, fine. Okay. All right. B3. Speaking of pacletinfo.m, there should be a tool to guess the pacletinfo field structure from the directory structure. So in other words, that's auto creation of pacletinfo files.
Yes, and that's true. We should do that. You know, a lot of this is just documenting the conventions of what a Paclet's supposed to look like, and when everyone's on the same page, it's pretty easy to infer the Pacletinfo, most of it at least, structure from the directory layout.
What do we imagine?
Vice versa.
Right. So pacletinfo files are right now written by hand. Is that a true statement?
Yes.
But so are we going to have some kind of notebook thing like these definition notebooks for pacletinfo files, where maybe they can have a button in them that says infer from the directory structure and auto-populate from the directory structure?
Yeah, I mean, if you just give the name and the version number and some, you know, Wolfram requirements or something, and point it at a directory. I mean, if the directory is conforms to the standards, we could basically infer the extensions. Yes, we could almost often.
So I mean, a typical thing.
I would say rather than being a .mb file, it might be a use the package editor with a custom. That was
exactly what I was thinking. So then that sounds like the right thing. So that would be the way. That's actually sort of an interesting thing because it's an interesting comparison to this, where we're choosing to use an actual notebook here. So the idea would be the Paclet preparation, the Paclet definition notebook. Well, the Paclet definition file would be a .wl package edited thing. Make sense?
Yes.
So the direct analog of this would be one of these.
What's the advantage of that?
That what's created is plain text and very readable, but also supports a basic level of cell structure. So you can have section and subsection cells and split up your code amongst them. You can have code in input cells, which is not executed as part of the package, but can be executed by you inside the notebook. And in doing all this, the result is still highly readable when you open it in a regular text editor.
Right. So, I mean, we should be able to see that if we go. Hold on a second. Let me just put this in someplace.
Yeah. So if you save that file and then file print it.
Right. Yeah, I understand. Yeah. So the idea is people are going to be
I'm
editing.
sorry, can I ask, does anybody know where I'm storing this? Is it
Text
under
edit.
package system? Where am I storing this? I'm assuming I'm storing it. Okay.
Well, while he's doing that, John, you're saying that this is the editor for Paclet info.m files?
What I'm suggesting is that we basically use the package editor that we have now, but instead of functions, sections, update, et cetera, that it would be, some, controls at the top that would be specific to Paclet info files.
Right, but this isn't something that spits out a packet info file. This is the Paclet info.m file?
Because
in other words, if you open it in the front end, that's what you see. I mean, it's already the case that, if you open any .m file, you see something.
Look at that.
Like
look at that. Isn't that lovely? Right. See, that's just showing. That's our analog of the JSON, the so-called JSON format, because we invented it 30 years ago, before JSON had ever been heard of. Right.
And notice that it stripped the output cell because under the theory that outputs are usually, you want to see them in the notebook that represents the .wl file, but you usually, don't actually want them in the .wl file. So notice there's no 7 there.
Right. And this makes sense too, because, for a function, it was important to use a notebook for the documentation, but here we're going to have multiple documentation pages. So you're going to have to be launching other, notebooks or files to create multiple things anyway.
Right.
Yeah, and documentation will still certainly be notebooks.
Yes. But it won't be. Yes, but the Paclet info.m or whatever the Paclet info.m authoring file, whatever this is, will not have the examples in line. Then the documentation will be in line here, like it is a function. It'll be off in different documents.
Exactly. This will work nicely. We should start putting this together. What this looks like. Okay, let's look at a couple more of these. Many interesting comments. We'll use this. Paclet install. Somebody's will fetch the latest release. npm install. Okay. That seems like a good candidate for the function repository, something that installs from a GitHub repository.
Well, in fact, I mean, I wanted to do that for a long time, basically to make GitHub a GitHub repository function as a Paclet server. And I don't know much about the GitHub API, but I'm sure there's a way to do that relatively simply.
I'm sorry, say that again. A GitHub what?
Well, we already have the ability to point at multiple Paclet servers.
Yep.
And
I see what you're saying.
I could make a GitHub repository act like a Paclet server, so that Paclet update foo would look for a Paclet named foo in a GitHub repository that it was known to this system.
Yeah, I know some about the GitHub API, and by the way, Sublime has something very similar where you can point to a GitHub repository and treat it as if it were just a repository of one.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what. And I always thought that would be pretty straightforward to just have some way to make. I mean, the Wolfram Language API for Paclet sites is very abstract. You just add them and you remove them, and they have certain properties. But I could teach the code in the Paclet Manager about a GitHub style Paclet repository, and it would just be one GitHub project or something, and you would have to know how to get the files off GitHub.
Yes, don't we already have a GitHub? Don't we have? Isn't that part of the service connections collection?
I'm not sure if it's. We developed a prototype of something. I'm not sure if we actually made it live.
No, I have igraph/m. That's cool.
I'd be surprised if they managed to do that without me knowing. I don't think they did.
There was something. I had some correspondence with Alan a while ago about. I mean, over a year ago about this.
So that's another action item here. I feel really disoriented that I'm not taking notes here, and I should have started doing that. But I hope Manu is doing that. So
Yes,
that's
Stephen.
another action item, is GitHub service connection.
Sure.
Yeah, you can ask me about that, Manu. I can dig that out of my mail.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. B3 is saying, in terms of using Paclets as dependencies, it'd be great to have a way for a Paclet to load as a dependency. I don't quite understand that.
I think that the thing is that right now there's really no general notion of loading of a Paclet. Some Paclets, for example, that have style sheets, just wire them into the system at startup. Paclets that load code are done through just the regular old-fashioned way, through context. So if I have a Paclet,
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. Once you've got the Paclet in there, you might still have to do a needs to get the Paclet to be active. But if it's installing a style sheet,
that's what we always do.
Right. But if you install a style sheet, it just installs there.
Yeah, it's always there for as long as the Paclet is there. It's always there.
Right. So a lot of my palettes menu will have been Paclets that just injected themselves.
Yeah,
okay,
it's why you have a DocuTools palette, for example.
So that's another namespace to control.
Well, so wait a minute.
It's even more important.
Let's start making some notes here. So I mean, the thing that we're talking about here, and by the way, I'm sorry, I'm gonna write down this GitHub service connection. So we've got a number of things we know we're building here. We've got the Paclet repository definition file, which is a .wl file. .wl file to be package edited.
Well, that's for
the repository.
Paclets, not the repository entry.
Right. Just
some of our conversation has gone back and forth across that line.
Right. Paclet information file or whatever. Paclet manifest. What is it? What should it be called? Paclet manifest?
Yeah.
That's fine. It'll change 2 more times before we're done.
Yeah. I mean, right now we call it Paclet info.
I know that.
That is the name of the file. I do not want to change that.
Paclet info? Well, okay. All right. AKA Paclet info, which has been that way since, since antiquity. Okay, but then we've also got the Paclet definition, Paclet repository definition file, repository definition notebook, which is your glossy notebook. Right, that's the thing that contains the shingle, contains information for the shingle.
It looks like
it's really a submission notebook.
Pretty thin. Yeah.
Yes.
There might be some things we want people to add in the definition notebook that aren't in the Paclet info, but I can't imagine there are very many.
I mean, it'll have hooks for,
names and things.
Hooks for creating documentation, because we don't have a good system for that.
Yeah,
also things like visuals.
I mean, the things that you'll see on the web page entry, some of those things will surely come from someplace like this, like the one paragraph description of what it even is, for example.
Right. Search terms, I think, are not in Paclet info.
There is a field for a one paragraph description in the Paclet info file. It doesn't have to be there, but I totally agree that we'll have some things that will be in a separate page for submission.
Right, repository sort of properties.
Okay, so now the question is, what is the initialization process for Paclet added material? Right. So, for example, e.g., functions typically get loaded with typically get initialized with needs. E.g., style sheets just appear in the style sheet menu.
Right. I mean, in fact, the Paclet manager handles all the stuff in a uniform way, in that it simply it weaves these things into the system so that any time they're asked for, they're gotten.
Right, but some things
for style sheets at startup. The kernel asks for .m files when you call needs.
I understand, but these ones are visually displayed. The style sheet list may be visually displayed. These are not typically visually displayed.
Right. And in the style sheet, that's because the front end has asked for what are all the palettes as it started up, and the Paclet manager gave it information about the palettes.
Right.
And then there's like documentation, which is a bit of both, because it has indices that
Right.
need
There's
to
a
be
runtime lookup
generated as soon as you load the documentation system, but the actual pages, of course, might not be displayed.
Okay, but hold on. For documentation, there are two issues. One is inserting itself in the tree. And there's a question of how it does that, because we traditionally have had something which has something about add-on packages where things auto-install here, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And that's this mechanism here. And the second issue is what happens with the text search. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Searching, and that's been a mess right now. If you install a new Paclet, you end up with this stupid dialogue that says, hello.
No, only if you haven't indexed it with our new stuff. If you
really?
it with old stuff, then you have the right index and it just works.
Right, and this is maybe Brian has something to say about this, but this is a little bit troublesome for somebody like me who has a Paclet that I want to be able to work on some older versions that don't support the new system.
When you make the new style of index, it also creates the old style of index.
Okay.
And ships it in the Paclet as well. So that is handled.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
So searching
then I need to talk to you offline, I guess.
Right. But so what this analog, this installed add-ons thing, is the direct analog of the fact that things show up in the palettes menu. Correct?
Yes. I mean that thing is created at the time it is requested. Paclet Manager weaves that page together.
Okay. Well, but my point is that what would happen is for a palette, you're literally just pulling it down and selecting it. Here, the obvious thing to do would be to have an analogous thing here, that something in the documentation allows you to go, if you wanted to, these could have buttons that say load me now.
They do.
They actually do, yeah. There are openers in there.
Okay. What does it do here? So what happens?
Open one of the groups, yeah. And manage, and then there's load, uninstall.
Wow. This is very space age or something.
This hasn't really been, it's been there for years and years. People don't know about it. It never gets talked about or used. It does exist.
Okay, so we've already built this, and that looks perfectly reasonable. Loading, automatic, manual, startup.
We're going to, I think we're going to want to completely, I thought you would look at this, Stephen, and say, what is this junk from 10 years ago? We got to update it.
No, it actually looks quite sensible. I mean, it doesn't look very nice graphic design wise, but it looks quite sensible. So this is
I think we'll need a more compact way to represent Paclets. I mean, you had to click twice to open up. I mean, sort of a spreadsheet, grid-like display of Paclets would make it a little more easier to see what's there and manage them without having to open up a bunch of
so
openers.
What's interesting about this is because functions have their own namespace, right? Because functions from the function repository have their very own namespace. You just don't have any of these issues. You don't have to say, am I loaded or not? And I mean, somewhere we've got to have an indicator of what's loaded. We need a visible indicator of what's loaded because that's, I mean, for example, if I send my notebook to somebody else, if there isn't an indicator of what's loaded, it's just like, how this doesn't work. Why doesn't this work? What am I going to do? I mean, the thing that's
your notebook is going to have, if your notebook is going to have need statements at the top.
Well, not if this thing just says load here, load now. Then it's not going to have any need statements. What's it going to do in that case?
I mean, if I'm going to distribute my notebook to the world, and my notebook requires functions that are not by default loaded, I put need statements at the top of my notebook.
Well, I understand, but this is a GUI that gives you a load now button, but that load now button leaves no textual trace in the notebook.
Right, but this is just...
But so we need to figure out how to deal with that, because either there's something that has to appear at the top of the notebook that said this had a load now pressed, and then it has to have something, or this has to simply synthesize a needs statement in the notebook.
There are a couple of other related questions which are a bit troublesome and which I don't have ready answers for yet. First of all, in addition to a needs statement, there's the issue of what if the Paclet just isn't installed? I have, not a program, not a Paclet, just a notebook that I want to share with people, but I want to ensure that they can run it.
Yeah, well, that's exactly, yeah, okay. So
what should I do in that notebook?
Well, what you can do is simply say Paclet install foo at the top.
Right, and maybe it's good enough for us to just say that, but we should at least be intentional about thinking about that.
And there might be a better way to, encode these sorts of dependencies without having to have these declarative lines at the top, Paclet install foo in a cell, maybe there's some way to do that without having to clutter things up with this, but that's how you do it now. You simply say, it's kind of like saying,
I don't know why I don't think that this is so traumatic. I mean, after all, we have initialization cells and things that's just like that.
Yeah,
so,
right. You could just put them in initialization cells.
Now, related, but slightly different, is the issue of documentation. So when you start putting examples in documentation, and if those examples, you don't want to put a needs line in every single example.
Boy, that's right.
We have done this before, but I'm not sure that there's really, I don't know, Brian, maybe you can comment on this. I'm not sure there's a really good first-class way of handling this.
I'd like to suggest that click to copy could help us.
Where the need statement will be baked into the click to copy, you mean?
It's a bit cruddy, isn't it? I mean, you don't want to actually see the need statement. I mean, is there any way that click to copy could have some metadata that you don't get to see?
I mean, an interpretation box or something that gets copied in?
John, do you
can always choose to copy something you're not seeing. That's not a problem.
Wait a second. So if we had click to copy, the thing that it delivers into could have an implicit need statement in it that it would check before it tries to run.
Well, right? No. I mean, if we do what I think you're suggesting, then you're copying something that's definitely not plain text, and it has kind of hidden stuff inside of it.
It's
a little uncomfortable.
Okay, but Stephen, that violates what you were concerned about before, because you don't want your notebook to have a trail of invisible things in it, right? If you need to execute needs in your notebook for that function to work, then you want to see the needs explicitly in the notebook. Otherwise, people will get confused.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so another way to do it would be, I don't know if this is doable. I mean, if we had an indicator in the notebook of these are the loaded Paclets right up here. I mean, to me, the things that, a top of notebook indicator of what kernel you're interacting with and what Paclets you have loaded would not be completely crazy.
But you might have a lot of Paclets loaded.
Right.
B, you might not know the context of those Paclets in the first place. And, we tell people about Wolfram Language code via context. We say, load this context. You don't even necessarily know what Paclet it comes from. You just know that I need to load
we can have a convention. So, by the way, I was going to object to the fact that there are two lines needed here, Paclet install and needs. Why can't we compress that into something like, a Paclet needs or something like that? That's a bad name. But
the thing about that is that you're not. A Paclet could have many contexts.
Well, let's
so it's
assume
not obvious which one to load.
Well, why don't you want all of them? Do you not want all of them usually?
I don't know. Maybe not. I mean, it's not at all obvious that you want all of them.
I think
there's no notion of loading a Paclet. Like I want everything in this Paclet in my system. I mean, we could add that, but that's not necessarily.
Well, hold on a second.
I mean, Paclets supply context.
Yeah, but you're saying
you choose to load those contexts.
Okay, how common is it that somebody wants to load a Paclet but only wants to use some of the contexts in that Paclet? Wants to activate.
It's very common among our internal Paclets, which use some sort of often tricks with like a loader context or something that does some work before loading the. I mean, most users won't need those tricks, and
Well,
I think
is
they
that
can go
because
away.
Is that because of the who's on first question of when you're doing initialization, that you can't initialize, you've got to initialize the initializer and so on? Is that why that happens, or is that?
I think in some cases there's some cases they're really important things where they need to check something before they actually load their code. I think some of the auto updating facility that I added to the Paclet Manager not too long ago obviates the need for much of this trickery.
But that's a very tricky thing. That the loading order can be super tricky of what has to be initialized before what happens and so on. Well, anyway, but
Todd, would it make sense to have a Paclet state thing that says for a named Paclet, I have no idea what this is. It's on the server, but not local. It's installed, but none of the contexts are loaded, or it's installed and these contexts are loaded.
I don't know if there's any. Made a decision very early on in the Paclet system that there's a decoupling of a Paclet, and Paclets have resources in them, and they might have some context that they supply, and you can choose to load those contexts. But those contexts, all that loading is done in a normal way. Paclet just makes them available so the system knows where to find these contexts. We don't say load this Paclet necessarily. We install a Paclet, and then you access some things that it holds at various times.
Keep in mind, Todd, that it might be acceptable not to try to solve this problem for Paclets in general, but for Paclets as constrained by the Paclet repository system.
Yeah. I was thinking if you can use needs resource Paclet or something like that, if that's what we call it, it could do the combination if necessary, or load it and its designated contexts.
Okay, one comment about documentation. Remember that in documentation, we are using localized contexts in the actual documentation notebooks. How does that?
Oh, I very keenly remember that. I'm thinking a lot about that.
I mean, isn't that what you were getting at, John, when you mentioned the needs in every example?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Between every delimiter, you have to have a need statement, or I think maybe I'm wrong, but I think I've seen some. Brian, is there some system where sometimes the encoded in a cell evaluation function or in a delimiter or something is a hidden need statement? Does that happen?
We have that mechanism, don't we, Brian?
Some people might use it, but that's simply relies on people evaluating the whole example delimiter included.
It's not a convention in DocuTools then, at least.
It was a convention at one time. I'm not sure if it survived.
I mean, I think if it didn't survive, I'm not familiar with it, but if it did not survive, I can see why it wouldn't have. It's it's hidden stuff that you don't really know what you're doing when you don't see.
All right, so look, I'm sorry, let's zoom out for a second what the actual problem is. The problem is you see a piece of documentation, or in general, you have a notebook or you have code. I mean, this is the wonderful thing about the fact that we have a nice integrated system that doesn't have lots of random dependencies. That you don't have to load all kinds of random stuff. Now we're in a world which is most languages world, where you have to kind of do your initial throat clearing of loading a bunch of packages before you can do anything.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so now the only question is whether, because we have this notion of a note, I mean, if you're just running a piece of code, if you're just expecting a piece of code to run, nobody is surprised that you have to have a bunch of package loading throat clearing at the beginning. However, in our case, because you can do this very granular, just paste something into a notebook and run it, that's more problematic, so to speak.
Well, yeah. I mean, there is a middle ground here. Right now, I mean, this is all handled by the cell context option. Excuse me. And in documentation notebooks, that's set to the cell group. So delimiters break groups. That means that each delimiter's each example is in its own group. We could set the cell context to notebook for these documentation pages, and then you have one need statement at the beginning, and that's it.
No, nobody's going to see it. I mean, people. Look,
well, I mean, it could be in an initialization cell, but I agree that even in that case, it still seems clunky.
Look, in click to copy, we could copy multiple cells. That's another thing we could do. It is clunky. It's okay. The issue is what you see is just the nice little piece of code that uses your fancy tensor manipulation package. You don't see all the throat clearing that went behind getting that ready. I mean, our examples generally are very context independent. Context in the everyday sense of the word context, right? They don't require a lot of setup.
Mm-hmm.
What if there was just like a little, purple dot that looked like it was composed to the beginning of each
iconized version of the needs.
An iconized version of the needs. That's, each one of our repositories has a color, function is orange. So I just said purple, but it could be whatever color we choose. We could have just a little dot.
Okay, now you have a good idea. Okay, so what we could do is something like this. You could say needs foo, okay? And then, okay, so what about something like this? Is this crazy? And then it's like, foo of 7 or something. And what we do, this may be crazy, is to say, where is it? Where is iconize? Oh, it's down here. Well, that's a less than beautiful iconization.
Well, yeah, but I will make something.
We understand the concept. Yeah.
That's an interesting idea.
I would show the semicolon.
I wouldn't. I mean, I would have the graphic design of that thing. This is a good idea.
Yeah. The semicolon can be in the design, but to convey that it is a compound expression without saying compound expression.
That's a good solution, I think. I mean, and that way, as soon as if you're pasting into a textual thing, presumably if I paste this into a text file, presumably, I don't even know, but I presume if I paste that into a text file.
I can't remember what it actually does, but if it doesn't do the right thing, we can make it do the right thing.
Well, it's almost magnificent. Right there. Yeah, I mean, it's a little funky, but it's almost magnificent. Right. So that's beautiful. This is a solution. And in fact, this is a solution we could now.
Well, by the way, part of that almost magnificent is, but not quite, is because I'm not actually sure that with the semicolon sitting inside there, I'm not actually sure that Shift Enter would do what you think it would do. It might actually multiply null by foo of 2.
All right, so that's an issue with iconize and the way that parsing works through iconize. That should be checked.
Yes.
So can Manu, that's something for you also to go check that?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, who?
Yeah, I mean, the tricky thing is, this may require if you're really wedded to pulling that semicolon inside of the iconize thing, this may require adding a little bit of functionality to the front end parser. It may not be something that's so easy to do.
Okay. Well, fine.
I mean, it's not end of the world stuff, but it might not be possible in the.
I think it's ugly to have a semicolon hang out there because I think people want to just think this is the code.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this doesn't sound like it's that difficult to. I think but this is a great solution. Let's get some nice icon. It's a very small, thin icon. And then this is something, Brian, I don't see why we shouldn't do this throughout documentation when we're documenting packages.
Yeah.
I we already have existing places where we run into the same problems, so I agree.
And I mean, I wonder how when you build the documentation, I wonder whether we can auto build this. You basically in the build system.
And by the way, this is one of 2 reasons why I have not written any examples for GitLink because of dealing with this. The other being that it's not clear to me how to, I just haven't run down the problem, but it's not clear to me how to have example data Git repositories.
That's an interesting problem. Okay, this is a great solution to this. Okay, let me look at a couple of things on the live stream here, and then I want to come back to with some other assets that we're going to need here. Okay, let's see. You should add function specifications to Paclets for running standard jobs like CMake does. e.g. $WL make test for running different tests, building artifacts, etc. That has to do with running I mean, we should be able to run verification tests. I mean, that's okay. Let me make.
Well, so this is related to the our discussion of what is the convention for just build this without having to look at a README or whatever. Just follow the conventions to build it.
Yes. Okay. Well. Okay. So
and then he's saying not just build, maybe, but also test, and maybe there are other, maybe deploy.
Yeah. Right. From a directory, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's something we're going to need functions that do that, whatever that is. But I mean, I think that's
and exposing those through Wolfram scripts so they can be done from the command line would be a great thing.
Okay. Well, I mean, it probably plus make sure this works. I mean, I wouldn't imagine they would work. I mean, that's the advantage of having them be just pure Wolfram language code. Okay.
Well, but this person's talking about CMake or, I mean, maybe building. It sounds like they're almost asking for, well, I mean, maybe they're saying if I have a CMake file, then your tool should run this file. Is that what they're saying? Or are they asking for like a build language?
It's a build language.
They're asking for, but that's a big job. That's like recreating Ant or something in the Wolfram language. Because as soon as we create that, people are going to start wanting more and more and more features for this build language.
Well,
and we use Ant internally for these things.
Yeah, and this is yet another in my list of reasons why Library Link isn't a part of version 1, because Library Link by itself makes this incredibly more complex.
What is Ant the analog of make in old
Yes.
in old Unix times?
Yeah, Ant is basically the Java, make tool, or make replacement, I should say.
Well, Ant has sort of been replaced already by other tools, but it's still quite useful as a low-level
yes, I am not
tool.
claiming that it's the most modern thing, but that was the notion in the day.
Okay. Actually, so SZ. Actually, the standard practice for packages right now is to put a needs at the start of every single example. Yeah, okay, this is what we just addressed. Just did a query against the Paclet context. Generally, by Paclet fine, because if I only do this once, it's more than fast enough. Okay. Okay, D8 says, I really wish there were a way to reset Paclets because my environment frequently gets screwy. That's an interesting thing. So do we...
I'd like to know if that's a matter of something that D8 is doing, in terms of trying to do some development stuff and things go bad, or if that's something that's coming from us.
So I think there's a question of, I mean, one question here is, uninstalling everything, ? Uninstalling to a certain point. But you don't want to uninstall everything because you'll uninstall.
Well, things are already separated into stuff that was in the original layout and stuff that's been downloaded from the server.
Right, but if you
installing everything from the server is
keeping a
drastic,
timestamp
reasonable thing.
back up to a certain time. That is. I mean, the thing is that we can't do that because when we install, I mean, we could, but it's tricky. I mean, when we install a new version of the Paclet, we delete the old one. If the new one is a direct replacement, so we'd have to go back and we don't make any attempt right now to checkpoint the Paclet repository.
Well, stepping back though, I mean, really, this is something that we've already talked about covering. We say that we need a Paclet Manager interface, and that Paclet Manager interface clearly needs to make a distinction between Paclets which are coming from Wolfram Research. These are official update Paclets to the core system, as opposed to Paclets that are coming from the Paclet repository, which are additional functionality.
Yeah,
and hopefully the ones which are part of the core updates, hopefully those are not problematic. I mean, that's that's how we deliver updates, so they're not supposed to be.
Let's see. Carl makes an interesting point, which is the purple dot could contain information about versioning, and it certainly could. I mean, in other words, by the time you've got a purple dot, it could have all kinds of stuff in it. I mean, the purple dot could actually say Paclet install blah 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 needs blah blah blah.
Well, that won't be necessary in documentation because you wouldn't have the documentation unless you had the Paclet installed. At least you wouldn't have it locally. I suppose you could have it
on the web.
Yeah,
you'd be looking at it on the web.
Right, but I think this argues for a combination function of install and needs.
Well, the other thing that I was thinking of is that I'm not sure that we literally want to call Paclet install anyway, because it seems to me, and feel free to disagree with me if you think so, but it seems to me that what you want to do is you want to say, if this thing is on the system, then use it and run with no error and no feedback whatsoever. If it's not on the system, then maybe we shouldn't just be preemptively installing because it's kind of random code from random people. Maybe what we should do is throw up an interface saying, this code is asking to install such and such package. Agree?
Right. Exactly. But I think that's exactly what we were discussing earlier about whether to, this is the sort of Paclet control UI, right? This is basically, automatically load, install any Paclet requested by Paclet install, or silently install any Paclet requested by Paclet install, warn about blah, 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 trust Paclets that Paclets from blah, 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 those kinds of things.
Yeah. And this is something I'd be keenly interested in because I'm a control freak when it comes to, how I use these sorts of systems. So.
Right. Well, fair enough. I mean, I think, by the way, one thing that was commented on the dynamic warning, which I, of course, hate, and hopefully we will be able to deal with more signing of things. But, it doesn't really say where the dynamic, it's like, show me the dynamic code. I don't know how to get to it. You know what I'm saying? Particularly when it's very unobvious where the dynamic actually is.
Yeah.
Okay, so next point here was Paclets can provide something like declare package, but better. They can declare which symbols are provided with automatic loading. Yes. Okay, Ethan says, what about an ergonomic way to browse Paclets from within the system? Yes, we know that. I mean, we actually have a browser. So in addition to the web version of the browsing of function repository, we're going to have an in product version of that. How will you identify the source of Paclets from the Paclet control UI as signature ? I assume that every Paclet will have an author, right? Every Paclet has that's something we just looked at in connection with notebooks that people get. We just came up with a something that will actually get into version 1.50 of the cloud, or maybe, no, I think it's now 1.51 that it'll get into. It's an interface.
But that's a good point, which is that I think that, I don't know if the Paclet Manager does this right now or not, but having some provenance of how the Paclet got onto your system, what server did it come from, and where on that server, that seems like useful information.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, we could have it. I mean, in this Paclet control UI, if trust packets from XXX, if XXX is a Paclet server, that's easy. If XXX is a person or an entity, then
we're into digital certificate world.
Exactly, we're into digital certificate world, and that's a whole new world. But if we just want to say trust packets from the Wolfram Research Paclet server, that's easy. Or trust packets from my own Paclet server, my company Paclet server, that's super easy. having it be, a verified identity is something else.
We could do, if we're talking about Paclet repository in the resource system, we could do trust Paclets from certain users if we're talking about loading them from their cloud account.
Yes. Yes. Actually, I wouldn't mind your input here, people. I assume there's nobody here who can pull this up. The mock-up for autocopy for notebooks. So anybody, if somebody could get hold of Matt Kay and ask him if he can send us a the current mock-up for autocopy, because that has this issue.
All right, sir.
So the issue is, if you in the cloud, okay, actually it occurs on the desktop as well with the dynamic warning, and it also occurs in the cloud. You have been sent something in the cloud, you always know where it came from. See what I'm saying? So John, you understand that in the desktop, you may just have a free floating notebook,
Yep.
an unidentified flying notebook.
Yeah.
In the cloud, your notebook always has an actual owner that is known, right? Okay, so the question is, what do you tell people? And my current idea, so there's one of the big questions is, do you give them the Wolfram ID of the original source or not?
I think you do.
Okay. Well then,
I mean, because this was my idea for digital certificate signing for notebooks on the desktop, which is that they're signed by a user, and that you can choose to trust all content created by that user.
Sure. Okay. Well, fair enough.
And Wolfram ID is that's the direct analog.
Okay. The question is a privacy question, of which I think we've concluded. So we're going to give two pieces of information. We're going to give the actual Wolfram ID, and we're also going to give how long the person has had that Wolfram ID. Okay, like member since, like what you get on credit cards. Member since whenever. Because I think a lot of the exploits that I can imagine involve somebody, I just created this thing yesterday type thing.
Or somebody putting in, I don't know, putting in JFolts, but substituting the letters from some other weirdo Unicode spot.
Exactly, but that will be caught by it saying created 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, but the question there was really, people don't see a problem. I didn't see it. I was trying to think it through. I mean, there's both things like personal name and there's the Wolfram ID. I think we're not going to give the personal name, but we are going to give the Wolfram ID.
That doesn't bother me.
Okay. You can't see a problem where people would have been, I mean, I guess in the world of GitHub and so on, obviously you're getting, IDs there and so on.
So GitHub, people have user IDs, but the user IDs and the email addresses are treated interchangeably. And oftentimes, I'll ask people for their user ID, and they don't even remember what their user ID is, but they know their email address that they registered their GitHub account under.
Right. Okay. All right. A few more comments here, and then I want to go back to a few things here for a minute. How you'll need a global variable to enable autoload of Paclets without the UI. Sure. Yes. I mean, obviously we'll have a version of that, an in-language version of the Paclet control.
Yes, it's kind of like our allow internet. We already have that UI and settable variables within the language.
Yeah, allow Paclet installs or something, or allowed Paclet installs. Not sure exactly how it would work, but something like that. That would actually need to be in here. That will be something like allowed Paclet installs or Paclet install. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what this is. What's that? Actions. What's that?
Paclets, or are you talking about auto loading?
I'm talking about auto loading. I'm talking about when you see
about auto updating. Auto updating.
Yeah, auto, well, actually
downloading,
multiple things.
Downloading any kind of install of the Paclet that is not. Right. But the thing is that if I type, how do I distinguish between me calling Paclet install and some code I run calling Paclet install?
Yeah, I understand that. So it's a direct call versus a. In other words, in the purple dot, is it? Basically, things happening inside the purple dot are different than things you explicitly typed letter by letter.
Well, I'm not even thinking about the purple dot. I'm just talking about in general. I think the concern that people have is that some code runs somewhere that calls Paclet install and gets some Paclet that
it's not
messes the system up. I didn't want that update or something. I didn't want that Paclet. But how do I distinguish between that?
Yeah, I understand. It's
when I type
annoying.
Paclet install.
Well, if you type.
How about a Paclet site settings so you can specify whether to install it from specific sites?
Well, that's what we're talking about here. Somehow,
Yeah.
but I don't know whether that's. I mean,
you don't want that underneath.
That ties into system server configuration, right?
Yes.
Adding Paclet sites through that, and it can also contain information.
Yeah, that's right, about how automatically they should be enabled. But I think that what we need here is a function that says, something like Paclet provision or something. And what that does is, if you're allowed to, just install plus needs, okay? Otherwise, put up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in other words, this is a function. And if you explicitly call Paclet install, but this function...
This is the function that we tell people to put in code that they're distributing or something. This is Paclet install is the user. You're doing it yourself. Paclet provision is the polite way to.
How do you stop
your code?
How do you stop somebody maliciously just having it do it directly?
Oh, wait, but keep in mind, things don't get to the Paclet repository, to our, to the public Paclet repository we're managing unless they follow our rules, and we will be automatically scanning for, adherence to those rules.
Right, but it's not necessarily
free queue of Paclet install.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Right. That's true.
Okay. All right. Carl is asking for a Paclet store. Yep, we absolutely want to have a marketplace for all our repositories. And Bradley here, is at the front lines of making that happen. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah. Bob's doing most of the work, but yeah.
Okay. Brian?
Curious about how we want to break that down. Which can be a future discussion, because I think Paclets are a distribution method for a lot of different things, and putting it all in one repository without separating interfaces from applications or style sheets would be an interesting question. If it's all delivered the same way, but we don't, we want to make it more searchable than dive into this Paclet repository and discover which ones are what.
Wait. I'm sorry. I missed something there. I got distracted.
Kind of talking about categories of...
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the same thing we're doing for any repository. I mean, we start off by having them uncategorized because there aren't very many of them. Then when there are lots, we start categorizing them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see a problem with that. I mean, what I would fully expect is that the shingling of the Paclet repository will look very much like the shingling of the data repository. Am I making sense? I mean, so in other words, that we will see something. By the way, here's a thing that I realized. Why isn't there a way to get to... Didn't we change these? Wait a second.
Change what?
I thought we made a completely new help menu. What happened to that? Or is this it? Here's my question. I'm a little disappointed that I can't get to all of our... Oh, we did that in the cloud. Wait a minute. In the cloud, there is a menu for getting to all of the repositories.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
Well, we have a top-level website, but I hadn't seen a menu with it.
No, look. Let me show you. I wonder whether I can go to the test cloud. Oops, that's definitely not the one to go to. Test cloud. Where am I trying to go? Say open new notebook. And then I think, where are they? Where are these? There is a place where, by the way, that is, well, somebody can report that. I'm sure it's known. This is super primitive. Where are all these things? There is a big long list. Boy, I'm confused here. There's a big long list that we made of repositories that is a nice thing that's a nested menu thing for getting to repository homepages.
That's great.
Yeah, I understand it's great, but I don't know where it is, which is, kind of spoils the point.
I mean, what I remember, the closest thing that I remember to that is the reorg of the file new menu.
No, this is a different thing.
We have the top level website, but that's a different thing too, right? Yeah.
No. That's not this. It's not this. Oh no, it's a thing. Matt K, if he's findable, would know this. Let's see. That's an interesting idea. Carl is pointing out when we talk about code signing, we should think about our blockchain. We do have a very nice, fine blockchain. That is an interesting thing.
One thing about the marketplace that maybe people would care about that would submit things on the stream is, how do we want to allow people to specify their pricing? Do we want to break into set tiers? Do we want set your price and it's up to you how many people actually pay it? That sort of question.
I think we should do the same as what Apple and other people have done. Just have, price levels, numbers.
Yeah.
And you can pick what you want there. I mean, there's no way we can decide that.
But a limited set of tiers for people to choose.
Right. Okay. Okay. All right. We're going to have to wrap fairly soon, but let's take a look. We're making good progress here. I want to just understand what it is we need to do. So that is a really horrifying name, Paclet install submit. I understand the functionality.
You came up with it. It's your name.
Oh, gosh.
Yours.
Well, I mean, how on earth does that relate to resource submit? Don't we have a resource submit to submit a resource to the resource system?
It's not at all related.
No,
this submit is asynchronous.
I'm well aware of that. That's why I'm horrified.
Why couldn't you just use session submit or local submit of Paclet install? Does it need its own function?
I don't know.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it uses this, stuff internally, but it needs its own function.
It has predefined callback or something that says it's here. Start using it.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Yes, there's a lot of that.
That makes sense.
Okay, so it's not a great name, but I understand the functionality. Okay, so I mean things like Paclet. How is a Paclet named? Because I mean, is it named like we name other resource functions or resource objects?
Well, so I mean, the answer for Paclets in general need not be the same as the answer for Paclets in the Paclet in the public Paclet repository.
Right. So Paclet. I mean, let's talk about Paclet naming then. So I mean, I think clearly one form of naming is just UUIDs in UUID'd cloud objects. Is that correct? I mean, you can just have it be a cloud object, can't you?
You can have a UUID name. I don't know if it is a cloud object.
It's not a cloud object. But
in the sense that a cloud object could represent a bundle of bits, where the bundle of bits is effectively a .paclet file. Yes,
sure.
That could be done.
Right.
Okay.
The Paclet name is a user visible user, that's something that users interact with.
Yeah, if it's part of the resource system, it'll have a name and a UUID. And we can control the namespace as we please. We can prefix it with, URL safe publisher ID is what I've discussed before, and some sort of separator, and then they can specify whatever name they want. Yeah.
Okay, so what it will look like roughly is, Paclet install, my favorite tensor package or something. Is that right?
No, I would suggest that there would be a username in there.
Really? Okay. So that's different from the resource system, where I can just say, reminding ourselves of the resource. I'm sorry, the function repository, for example.
Right. The function repository. Yeah, it's not like that for function.
Oh, let's see. Andrea just joined, and I was going to ask if she knows. What was I trying to do? I was trying to do something in the cloud here. Yeah, I may have the wrong PM here, but
a shared namespace requires a higher level of scrutiny.
Sorry, I'm going back a step here. There is a place in the cloud where we set up a very nice, I think it's a documentation type thing that shows all the various repositories. Do you know where it is? Oh, wait a minute. What's the? Oh, here's where it is. I could have found it myself. What the heck is this? That is really ugly, but this is an unreleased version. Here it is. Archives and repositories. It's part of the it goes to there. What the heck? There's a version of this that is in some kind of pull down, and I just don't know where it is. I was wondering. Maybe Andrea
clicks either way. I don't care too much. Whether you load a lightweight page and then go to the repository, seems fine.
No, I understand, but there is a nicely organized pull down somewhere. Andrea may be the wrong person. I'm sorry if you're the wrong person, but do you happen to know where it is?
No, but I can check because it must be with the new design of landing pages that matter.
I think so. Okay,
I can look for it.
Okay, thanks. If you find it, just send it in chat. Okay, backing up to this. So what we're doing in the function repository, in and neural net repository and so on, is we're just, there, wherever it is, here. What did that just do? That just did that. Well, that was right. So it takes.
What it's supposed to do, yeah.
What's that? I know that's what it's supposed to do.
Okay.
Right. Right. So this is a case where there's no author name or anything in here.
Right.
Now, the alternative for this would be if I say resource object, it's globally unique here. So if I say resource object of that, I will get that thing there.
Mm-hmm.
Why the heck is that bitmap art there at 125%? It looks terrible.
Yeah, there's something funny with that.
I think it should be vector art.
It should be an SVG. Yeah, we'll look into it.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, when we review these things, we put a lot of scrutiny into making sure that the name is the right thing for the function.
Yeah.
So
I know.
John is very much in favor of a lower level of scrutiny for Paclets. So we want user-based namespace.
I see. So you want something.
So my claim, for example, is people come in and squat on highly desirable names with low quality things. And to be clear, I think people should absolutely be allowed to publish low quality things. We should not stop low quality things from going on the Paclet repository. But if people put low quality things under highly desirable names, it's going to cause problems.
Okay, so what you imagine is something like this. I mean, that's my registered base name. That's not my full email address, but that's my registered base.
I think that
would be.
I think that we can, basically say we're not going to deal with full email addresses. We could have, a short version that, maps.
We already have that notion. We have $. What is it called? $cloud URL.
User base URL.
I have to go look it up.
We also have publisher IDs.
No, but what I'm thinking about is
I know
cloud
user base
URL base.
User base something.
User
right?
URL base.
Yeah.
I mean, if we have something now, great. If we don't have something, we could say, you can register for one the first time you publish a Paclet.
Why does that say none? Why does that say none? Oh, that's weird. Okay, I simply wasn't connected. But then that's what that does.
Mm-hmm.
And those are globally unique across our Cloud ID system.
Okay, so that would be fine.
Yep.
I could imagine if we, maybe not right out the gate, but we could establish a tiered level for these where we could use user URL base for the lower quality submissions, lower level of review, those automated checks John was talking about.
Yeah,
but also a higher level with the publisher ID, with, the higher level namespace potentially, based on the existing review systems that we have. Something that would be slower and have a bit more scrutiny.
I'm not in favor of that, although I am fine with doing something that's like the equivalent of an editor's picks sort of thing, of calling things out that we think are great, but I don't think that we need to be treating them as differently from a code perspective. If you understand what I mean.
I agree. Yeah, I think like the Twitter checkmark is the thing, right? Yeah, just give it a checkmark. And people will be like, oh.
But that's a verified.
Yeah, right. Verified.
Boy, that was hard to get. I remember when we were getting that for me. That was just ridiculous.
Yeah, but people respect it, and it means something, even though it's just a checkmark. Because a human has actually scrutinized something.
Right.
So all it is a checkmark on a screen. I think one idea that I had, you could set like dollar trusted publishers path, and then if all you give is hi there, it'll look along that path of trusted things and give you the first one.
Fair enough. I mean, that's a search question. That's really a question of what Paclet Find does. I mean, I don't think doing that. Well, okay. I think you should. If that's the name, use the name.
Well, I think what Bob is talking about is closer to context management rather than Paclet management. And I think clearly we are going to need to beef up some of our context management for the stuff that we're talking about here anyway. So I'm happy to have that discussion.
Well, I was talking about Paclet management, but I was just saying a scheme similar to what we've talked about for context management, where it searches along a path, of user. If you just, if these usernames are not fun to type out, and is it 2 colons? Is it an underscore? I can't remember. Is it a slash? This is annoying. And you just want to use the name. There's a way to configure it to work.
This appears to be some kind of sidebar that exists in some version. This is a bit odd, actually. What's here? It's really quite odd.
So this is what you were talking about earlier?
It is on.
That's what I was talking about, yeah.
Quick links. Okay.
Yeah, but this is a very odd list here. And this is not the way it's supposed to look, I don't think. Andrea, can you, I don't know whether this is thought to be the way it's supposed to look, but it doesn't look right to me. It's too emphasized.
I'm going to compare with the mock that Billy has.
Okay. Okay, a question from D8. What about organizations? If I'm making my Paclet for Cisco, not spelled the usual way, I want the name to be so-and-so : good Paclet. Yes, I mean, that's the question of whether it's an organization name here. Yes, I agree that you want organization names.
Publisher IDs cover that.
The difficult thing about organizations is that, you want to have, rather than one login for the entire organization, you want, users who can act on the behalf of an organization in, more or less limited ways.
That's exactly what we have.
Exactly what publisher IDs do.
Oh, good. Good. Okay.
In 12.1, that'll resolve to a value. Right now, it's only something you can set.
What does it resolve to? Does it resolve to a human readable thing like Wolfram, or does it?
Yeah. Each person has a default publisher ID if they have any publisher IDs, and it's something human readable. It's whatever you registered and were given.
But so, how do you make sure that some imposter can't send something out with a publisher ID of I don't know who? But
well, you have to have your publisher ID approved before you can even submit a resource to be published.
Right.
But then your wait a minute. Then your cloud ID is connected to that publisher ID. Is that correct?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But for example, in our company, we could have hundreds of people connected to our publisher ID.
Yeah.
Yes.
And how do they get approved to be connected to our publisher ID?
There's a form that you fill out, and then
but look, think about it as a I mean, it's sort of an HR issue for some company X, right? They have employees who are logging in.
Right now, managing them is done. Right now,
work?
managing them is done over email. Right now, but we could have an interface for it.
And there is a concept of an administrator of the publisher ID. I think it's just
Right.
the first, most publisher IDs right now are 1-to-1, but they can be many to many. And I think by default, we have a field for administrator or manager. I don't remember what we call it. And the person who requests it is currently in that role.
I see.
But it can be changed. And so if they wanted to restrict it, it would have to be that person that requests people be added.
Yeah, that framework's all in place. It just needs an interface.
I don't know how it works for like app stores. I mean, I think that we have sort of designated people who deal with these app stores.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how that works, but we should find that out. I mean,
done
this
that.
will all get, what's that?
I've done that in the past for us.
Right. But how does it work? I mean, how do you get connected to our Apple, app store system or whatever it is?
When I was doing it, I think we just had one login that two of us shared.
Okay, fair
so
enough.
there wasn't like a many-to-many setup that I used, but
Fair enough.
we can certainly look into it further. And
sorry, I was distracted. You're talking about how we do like Apple App Store.
Yeah.
So things have improved since then. We have a central login just so that if somebody leaves a company or gets hit by a bus or something, that we have ways to recover that. But then we also have for the kind of admin. But we also have some roles which are delegated. So, for example, Rob has a developer role actually Rob is in the admin role. We have other people, or Nick is in the developer role, and they can use their own accounts to access the things that they're allowed to.
Okay.
Facebook apps work entirely through individual accounts.
Yeah, well, because they're individual oriented.
Right.
Okay, we should wrap in a moment here. We've clearly got more to discuss. I don't understand this Paclet site management. I mean, that has to do with which sites you are. That seems like an overly complicated set of things, and I don't know why the system server configuration stuff isn't handling this.
It could. I mean, it would.
Good, but I mean, you need to be able to specify your own sites, though. I mean, users need to be able to specify their own internal site, for example.
What do you mean?
Configuration would allow that.
Well, if so as we've talked about, we want to have the option of people having their own Paclet servers, behind a corporate firewall or something.
What is the Paclet server?
It's our current Paclet server is a very simple web app written, a few pages of Java code that serves up files, logs things, checks some things.
Okay, so it will be will you be able to freely download a new Paclet server?
We can easily make the code for our Paclet server accessible, but it's also, a Paclet server can be just a directory on a shared file system. We already talked about having some way to make a GitHub repository act like a Paclet server. We have. Okay,
so it could be backed by by a GitHub repository,
directory, or our own server, or our
by
new
a web
server.
by a directory on a website. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. A directory on a website with nothing, with no logic at all, would be fine.
Okay, or it could be backed by our server, our Paclet server, which handles versioning and things like that. Is that right?
Yes.
Whereas these other ones, do they handle versioning?
Well, I mean, you're responsible for the Paclets that you put on your server, right?
But how does it know whether there's a new version? If it's just a random directory on a website, how does it know if there's a new version?
Well, there's an index file. You have to build an index file that sits on the Paclet server that is an index of the Paclets that are there. Okay. And we have a tool in the product that does that.
Okay, well, hold on. If you do this, then, but you always need to build a Paclet index file.
Yeah, every time you update your server, you need to build an index file.
For the GitHub repo case, it might look different because in that case, it's a repository of one.
Right, that would be different.
Okay, I understand.
In that case, maybe it might just literally grab the Paclet info file just to find out what the version is.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, what builds the Paclet index file?
The Paclet server index file. The Paclet site, there's a function. There's an undocumented function. It's not even exposed. I think it's a semi-private function in the Paclet manager that builds a site. It's called build Paclet site index, and it takes a directory and
the name
makes the file. Yeah, creative.
Okay. All right. Okay. Fine. But then, okay. So just walking through
that would become a public. That would become a public function.
Right. Okay. So then this needs, Paclet index build or something. It's the analog. It's the analog of actually create Paclet index would be the right name for it. It's the analog of create search index, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what the heck is Paclet activate?
That is your name. It's a replacement for the function Paclet directory add. It's a way to dynamically, in the middle of your session, to say, tell the Paclet manager to look at some other non-standard set of places for Paclets. So you have your development
it's most useful when you're doing development of Paclets.
Yeah, you use it all the time. You're working out of some layout. You're editing your .m files in the layout. You say Paclet directory add. You point at this directory, and then when you load your context, it pulls it from there.
I hate my name for this. I'm sorry. I messed up here. That name is incomprehensible. I don't particularly like Paclet.
How about Paclet directory add?
Yeah, how about Paclet directory add and Paclet directory remove?
Let's at least put those in there for now.
Couldn't it just be a Paclet path that you just append to or remove from, like we do with $path?
I would think that would work reasonably.
I mean, just the only thing is that I don't like the notion of a path because there's not an order associated. Like our own $path is an ordered thing. But there is not an order here.
Okay, could I see a Paclet info file? So, I mean, do we know, have we been cleaning up the format of the Paclet info files?
The format of the Paclet info file, you've seen this before. We talked about it. The only real change you had was turning Paclet into a Paclet object.
Okay. And is it a, oh no,
are we making the keys strings?
Oh, I see. This is Paclet object. Yes, we need to make the keys strings.
So I can...
So much more hassle to type it as the keys are strings, whatever.
I can begin to put together documentation for, what a Paclet info file does is something that can be discussed in the next meeting.
Okay. But this, so what we would do is this would be creatable from the we'd be able to build this from the .wl file that is the package version of the Paclet info, or you could explicitly build this. That makes sense?
Yep.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And by the way, I don't know if anyone in the Twitch session is typing frantically. We'll certainly support old style Paclet info and .env files.
Yes. All right. Very useful, guys. I think we should wrap up here. A bit longer. This went a lot longer than I expected. And I missed another meeting. And now I'm super hungry.
But you're gonna send out this notebook, right?
Manu is going to send it out. He knows where it is, right? Manu?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And did we even get to the first? I mean, yeah,
we've covered a decent bit of territory, but there's a lot of details that we have to dig into.
Yeah, I mean, moving packets to the CDN is something that's going to happen for sort of blessed Paclets, so to speak. We're not going to move a random Paclet to the CDN.
Well, we might move packets to CDN just to relieve load from server.
Sure. It's a caching strategy to move it to the CDN.
Well, and so do we have a way to move blessed? I mean, if a Paclet is a resource object, do we have a way to move blessed resource objects?
We just set that up. It's a recent thing, right?
Yep.
Bob? And
yep.
Is it actually running today?
Not on production resource system, but it's on the way. It's in testing.
Okay, because that was done for like 500 megabyte neural net resources. We were actually killing some of our colos, some of the network connections, because we were repeatedly downloading tests of 500 megabyte neural networks.
Yeah, I remember that discussion. Okay, that's good.
Okay, but I don't know what our internal, presumably we will have an internal function repository function that moves things into the CDN with appropriate authentication.
That last little bit makes things tougher. Yeah, for public content, yeah, we have. That's what I've made, and it's being tested.
The thing that moves it, or what? How do you authenticate to move something? You can't just. I mean, I don't even know how you.
Sorry, which part are you talking about? Authentication. I think we're going off.
Yeah, we are, but authenticating, actually moving assets into the CDN.
Oh, right. I thought you meant authentication when you were retrieving.
No, not at all.
Yeah. Okay.
How do you authenticate when you move assets to the CDN? Is that done by the Syscom group or what? Who does it?
Yeah, Warren set up the actual moving of files.
All right. Okay. Well, great. All right. Thanks all very much, and thank you particularly to people on the live stream. Very active and very useful. Much appreciated. Okay. See you all soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.